Hey, Terry here. Welcome to another video. Recently, I was going through the viewers' comments and I came across a very interesting one just posted recently from Poland. So if you're watching Poland, thank you for commenting. I hope you subscribed, and if you haven't, please do so. And I hope to hear more from you. It was a very good question. This viewer in Poland asked me the question, how safe are black powder revolvers in a holster, and can they go off on their own? Now, by black powder revolver, of course, I understand they meant cap and ball black powder revolvers, and that's this part with the brass cap powder and then a lead ball or conical projectile. In the early 1870s, the first cartridge revolvers were released. They were also powered by black powder. So all cap and ball revolvers are black powder, but some cartridge revolvers, the early ones, were also black powder. But most of the times when people ask about black powder, they mean cap and ball black powder. Well, the second part of the question, can they discharge on their own, is actually very easy to answer. The short form is no, they cannot just discharge on their own. But what the person I think is really asking is, how easy is it for a black powder revolver to be unintentionally discharged while carrying it in a pocket or in a holster, or if I'm just walking around, maybe carrying it in my hand, right? Are there any special safeties or procedures I need to go through? Just how dangerous or safe are these things? Cap and ball revolvers, unlike conventional firearms, do not have what is called an interlock or an interrupt safety device. And that means some kind of a device that you push a button, slide a bar, whatever, something inside the firearm locks the mechanism up so the hammer cannot be drawn, the trigger cannot be pulled, it cannot be fired. It is a physical interlock safety. Now that is really a true safety. That doesn't mean it has no safety whatsoever or no safety features. Now, people who are not incredibly familiar with black powder or history will sometimes say that the only really safe way to carry a loaded black powder or single action revolver is to carry in 5 loaded rounds with the hammer down on an empty chamber. Now, I'm not going to argue that that is really a very safe way to carry a firearm. I'm not going to question that. If you want to carry any revolver and know that it is absolutely safe, even with the safety pushed or slid, because they can be unintentionally disengaged. But if the hammer's on an empty chamber, the trigger has to be pulled, the hammer has to be cocked, some deliberate action has to be taken to cycle this into a live round where it can shoot. And the same thing is true with semi-autos. You can load the magazine and you can put the magazine in the gun, but if you don't work the slide and chamber around, you can pull a trigger all you want, it's not going to shoot. You have to operate the slide to get that first round into the chamber. And that's a very safe way to carry a firearm. But that doesn't mean that's the only way to carry these. And the thing that really kind of irks me about these people who say, oh, you have to carry a revolver with a hammer down on an empty chamber. They'll always come up with something to follow it up with, like, and that's the way they carried them in the olden days. No, it is not. It's how they carried them when the first cartridge guns came out. These firearms were not typically carried on an empty chamber with 5 rounds. They were carried, generally speaking, most people carried these with the cylinder fully loaded on 6 rounds. And there's a reason for that. Let me break this down and I'll show you. Okay, now, you see this cylinder? Oh yeah, and you can also notice that this cylinder is loaded. That's why I took it out of the gun. It's got brass on it. Now, before any of you self-appointed safety rangers give me a lecture on gun safety, go away. This is for the grown-ups. You see in between these 2 caps, you see that pin there? And then this one here, you see that pin? That pin is between every two chambers. Now, you see on this empty frame, you see that slot there in the face of the hammer? Not the sight, not the grooved slot on top, but on the face here. You see that slot there? Well, the way they would actually carry these in the day is they would load all 6 rounds, put caps on all 6 rounds, put the cylinder in, put the hammer on, or the barrel on, right? Then they would cock it like this, full cock. They would then lower the hammer down onto a cap. They'd then pull the hammer back just enough that the pin would draw down, just enough to release the cylinder. They'd rotate that cylinder so that pin lined up with that groove, and they'd lower the hammer down on the pin. So you had a loaded chamber on this side, you had a loaded chamber on this side, you had the hammer down with that pin and groove locked together in between. And in theory, that would keep the gun from firing unintentionally. You got a loaded round, and you got the hammer down on a pin. Cylinder won't turn, right? I'm not going to say that's safe or that's a safety. It's safer than carrying it with the hammer down on a cap. It's not as safe as carrying the hammer down on an empty chamber, all right? But that's how people really carried them. The thing about this is, if they drop it and it lands on a hard surface, even though this is spring loaded, there's a spring holding, I'm not pushing this back and forth, I'm just pulling it back and releasing it. The spring is holding this hammer down against it, against the cylinder. It's not an incredibly powerful spring, and the shock of dropping it onto a hard surface could cause the hammer to bounce back, could cause the cylinder to rotate, lining a cap up with the chamber, and it could fire. Again, theoretically, let me show you something else. And if you're the viewer who asked the original question, if this is more information than you wanted, I apologize, but I wanted to give an in-depth, detailed explanation for my opinion, why my opinion is my opinion. Now, watch this. Full cock. Now you see how far I had to pull that back? You see how the distance between the hammer and where the cylinder would be if it was here, or the cap would be if it was here? That's not accidental. It isn't, that's just how they had to do it. That's half cock. And they could have designed this very easily so that going to half cock would have fully rotated the cylinder onto a chamber. This could have been called full cock, and you could have pulled the trigger and fired it. But you see, it's locked. It won't fire. That's another sort of safety feature of this firearm, kind of, sort of, but it won't just shoot. And no, that's not where the expression going off half cocked came from. That's a different story. But you got to pull it back that far for it to reliably ignite the cap. That probably won't do it. In fact, I have tried it before and I couldn't get the thing to fire. I had to go back all the way. Just doing that out in the forest one time, I never got it to shoot. Now, it's raining right now. I don't want to get out in the forest because it's been tipping down off and on here erratically, very heavily. So I'm staying home. But I'm going to show you that sometime. In theory, it could shoot. It's probably not going to. I'm going to give it 80, 20, 90, 10 that it's not going to shoot. It's not 100% though. I do have to admit that. And for people who are afraid of firearms and become so obsessed with safety, they become self-designated safety rangers. That's not good enough. I'm giving my opinion. I'm not afraid of guns. I do respect them, but I have a great deal of respect for them, but I'm not afraid of them, subconsciously even. So I'm not obsessed with safety. I believe in a common sense approach. It might fire. It's probably not. It's not a good thing maybe to rely on it, but it is a safety feature of the gun. Okay, so I'm a civilian. I got my cap and ball revolver loaded, got my hammer down between chambers. How safe is this thing to carry? Well, again, you can carry it in your pocket. Just keep in mind that if that hammer gets cocked back, this thing's going to shoot. There's no way to lock that hammer down, but you got to cock that hammer all the way back. And it does have a spring on it. It has some resistance. It's not incredibly easy to pull, just not incredibly difficult. But I would say this is safe enough. I mean, I carried them like this before. I didn't have any problems with it. But the firearm really is just part of the picture. It's it's part of a weapon system. And the other part of that system is the holster. I really don't recommend carrying any firearm in your pocket unless you've got the hammer down on an empty chamber, or if you're carrying a semi-auto, you've got the chamber empty. You can carry magazine in it, but no bullet in the chamber. You have to operate the slide before you can shoot it. That does slow you down in certain situations. Um, Carrying on an empty chamber does limit your fire capacity from 6 rounds to 5. That 5th round could be important. That's why it's kind of up to what any individual, feels like doing. There's no, this is how you got to do it, which some safety rangers will tell you. It's a personal thing. It's entirely up to you how confident you are with your firearm. And that confidence can only be developed through practice, use, time, really. But to get back on subject, the holster is the second part of the weapon system. Carry your firearm in a holster, and this thing is very safe. Even now, 6 rounds loaded, hammer down on the safety pin between the chambers, locked into this holster with this safety strap. Hammer is not accidentally or unintentionally going to get cocked. Squeeze the trigger all you want. Nothing's going to happen because it's single action. It's safe. It can potentially, in theory, be just jerked out of this holster if somebody jerked on it really hard. But what's likely going to happen is they're either going to jerk it out of my belt and they might just jerk me over into them instead. In conclusion, I wouldn't recommend carrying a fully loaded firearm in your pocket. I will confess that I do occasionally do it, but I don't recommend other people do it. If you want to, it's a personal choice. So go ahead. Just understand that you are personally responsible for any actions that might occur and any consequences of those actions. If you want to carry a gun, any gun, in your pocket, put it on an empty chamber in a holster in your pocket. If you want to carry in a holster on your belt, on your shoulder, anything like that, black powder, meaning cap and ball revolvers, can be perfectly safe if you use a little common sense and just treat them with respect. They very easily could seriously injure someone, yourself, or even worse, somebody else, if they're abused, not respected. So be careful, be safe. Yes, black powder, cap and ball revolvers, and single action cartridge guns, even in the old days, can be carried very safely and will not just discharge on their own. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Thanks for watching. And the sky is getting dark. I mean, black. It's going to just start tipping down any time now. So going back inside. Oh, one more thing. If you have subscribed to my channel, thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't, please do so. I invite you to subscribe and click the like and notification buttons. And feel free to leave a comment. Like I said, just don't try and poop on me over anything. Keep it clean, keep it intelligent. You'll get a clean, intelligent response. Get nasty, you'll get deleted and blocked. Thank you. See you next time.